When a man loves a woman, he spends so much time just loving her all night long. Hey, we are back for another episode of Relationship Topia. Last week, we talked about part one of when a man loves a woman. We talked about communication, acts of service, and we just wanted to finish out this series. Before this series, we talked about when a woman loves a man. So, on this podcast, we talk about all things relationship with God, relationship with self, and relationship with others. All pivotal for our lot in life, or for us to live a life that is fruitful, healthy, successful, and thriving. All three of those relationship types are vitally important, and all of them are kind of interdependent upon
Absolutely.
one another, if you would. So we always say, if the material that we share does not directly or impact you or directly what I'm saying
If it's not directly
resonate
related to your situation.
yeah, if it doesn't resonate with you,
Mhm.
then I'm sure that indirectly it certainly does. So we want to go ahead and go over three final tips for this series, and then we got some hot and juicy coming up next week. So stay tuned. Make sure you like the podcast, like the page, share it with others. If you found this material valuable, and if it has been helpful for you and your relationships, please do share. We would appreciate it. Comment, let us know, how you're enjoying it, and be, also, share any topics or anything that you would like for us to cover and things of that nature. We do look forward to having folks on in the 2025 year. So who knows, it might be you.
Absolutely. And make sure you take a moment to write a review for this podcast so you can share with everybody your experience and all the things. And lastly, before we get into it, once even like you can watch this, but you should go back and watch part one, if not the whole series of this, when a woman loves a man, man loves a woman, so you can get the full context of the conversation, because it was so juicy last time. We didn't even expect it to be a two-part for the man loves woman, but it was so juicy and we was getting so deep into so many things. We didn't want to rush it, so we broke it out into two, and this is the second part of that.
Right.
So but that says, tell us, this is really number 4.
Yeah.
You got to go back to the last one to see 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. So we talked about, we gave the definition of love and respect. We talked about the communication aspect. And then we talked about acts of service, but more so in line of supporting, the supportive factor of how a man demonstrates that in a relationship with his significant other. So number 4 is quality time. And this is significant because if he's not trying to spend time with you, sis, I mean, that says a lot.
Yeah.
So him prioritizing and even reprioritizing his time, his schedule, making you a priority shows that he's considerate toward you, shows that he loves you, shows that he's committed to you, committed to the relationship. It shows his level of dedication. It shows that he's selfless in that respect as well. So you want to look out for that. If he's always making excuses, if he's always putting other people over you, before you, if he does not basically prioritize his time with you, and he shows a lack of responsiveness when it comes to you wanting to spend time with him, I really question his love for you.
Right. And I have to say this because sometimes this even can happen in a marital relationship, and it can be very difficult. And so I'm going to say this advice that you get to take, whether you're single or married, it still applies. Which you have to remember, like this whole courtship, the man should be the leader, he should be the initiator. And with that, it's like a dance. And so if he's taking 1 or 2 steps back, you get to take 1 and 2 steps back. If you don't do that, if he's taking 1 or 2 steps back and you start moving towards him, then that's where your attachment style is revealing itself as perhaps an anxious attachment style, where you're going towards a secure attachment style. Stands and say, okay, he's taking 2 steps back. At best, you may just stand where you are, but maybe even take 2 steps back because you're still going to be secure in who you are, in the person that you are. You may feel a certain type of way and be uncertain about the future of the relationship, but just standing and knowing that you're going to be okay. But this is really important because, like Cheryl's saying, if a guy is digging you, feeling you, vibing you, whatever, even if it's your spouse, then they get to do that. And you really don't even have to have, and you don't want to have a whole bunch of long drawn conversations about that. You can express your desire. Hey, it would really, really lovely if we spent more time together, something like that. But you want to avoid the complaining and criticizing, because that's just going to be take you in the opposite direction, and it repels the guy even more.
Like a repellent.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would say this too, Jill, not but, because I'm not dismissing anything you said. I'm going to add to that because, we talked about the communication piece last week. So not nagging or complaining, but I do feel it is important that when you do see him start stepping back, or you guys become distant, when you start seeing less and less prioritization when it comes to spending time together, be it date night, be it, the things that you used to do. If you see those things happening less and less, you need to say something. When you see something, you say something. I am an advocate of that, too often. And I've seen this just in the line of work that I do. Couples wait until it's too late. And, you can argue and say it's never too late. Well, I mean, when you get to a point where things are chronically, consistently happening, it's a little hard to come back from that. Not that it is impossible, but it's harder to come back from that, rather than you address it early on. Just like, if you're 1,000 miles over your oil change versus 5,000 miles, it's, easier to go ahead and get that oil change at 1,000 miles over versus 5,000, because if you're 5,000, your car is probably broken down at that point. Your engine is gone, right? Other things start happening. So when you start seeing minor things, there's a scripture in the Bible that says a small fox spoils a whole vine, or destroys a whole vine, and a little leaven leaves a lump. So little things turns into bigger things, and all too often we see the little things, Joe, but we ignore them because we don't want to say anything. It's not a big deal, or there are other things that we feel are more more important, or we prioritize other things, the children and other things, and we don't get, or not even the kids together, because that's not necessarily just toward married couples. But if you have children or other responsibilities and obligations, let's just say that your job, your business, we tend to prioritize those things, and we leave the relationship sometimes to take care and nurture itself. And that is not possible. Not even the relationship with your parents, your siblings, your children, your boss, your employees, your employer. No relationship can take care of itself, can fend for itself. It needs a helping hand. It needs a support factor. It needs you to be the power steering fluid, if you would, since we're talking about cars, of that relationship, in order for that relationship to grow, to evolve. And that's where the work comes in. A lot of people don't want to do the work, and they find themselves at the end of the road, and all these things have transpired, and they've avoided, ignored, dismissed, not prioritized, and now we're at a crossroad to say, okay, if we're going to be together, or if we're going to be apart. So that quality time is important.
We may have to do a whole episode on doing work, because when I'm thinking, as soon as you say that, I'm like, and sometimes I got a whole thing I want to say about that, but I'll keep it short. Sometimes doing the work is on yourself, and then sometimes the work, a lot of times, and I think it's so easy to dismiss that. And then sometimes doing the work has to be learning, developing the skills, the communication skills, some things we talked about last episode, and things we're going to talk about next within conflict resolution, those skills that you get to develop and cultivate. And we just want to say that, like, that's so important, guys and gals alike.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to do that, because that's a huge thing. I've heard, I'm just say this one more thing about going to work. Couples or individuals normally would say, well, if I have to do all that, why would I want to be in a relationship? I'm like, what? That makes no sense. You want
it to be easy, and like,
there's no relationship is easy though. Look at it. Your relationship, you have to work your relation with your parents, if they're still here, your siblings, your children, your boss, your employees, every relationship that you have. Let's think about it right now. You have to work on that relationship, for that relationship to, number one, be sustainable, and number two, be able to thrive.
And honestly, the truth be told, relationships where there is no arguing, and when everybody's always copacetic, is actually a relationship that's in most danger of failing, because in those cases, a lot of times people are not being authentic. So we have to learn how to have healthy
disagreements.
Absolutely. When we're and then not take it as, oh, this relationship is falling apart or whatever, like having a healthy tussle, because you're trying to understand, where does the boundary lie? Where's the expectation? Okay, how do you need me to support you? How do you need me to show up for you? Vice versa. And if you're not willing and able to do that, then you don't need to be in a relationship. Like, that's just mind-boggling to me. Like, some people like, oh, I'm not going to do that. Well, if you're not going to care about the person's feelings, you're not going to care about what they expect and what they need, well, why y'all in a relationship?
And Jill, don't we have to work on our relationship with Christ?
Yeah, everyone. And so every day.
salvation, yes, is free. Sanctification, we continue to work on, and that's a gift as well. But we have to work in that on those relationships, work on ourselves continually so that we can present our best self, our better self.
For sure.
The same thing for your significant other. We do more in our jobs, in our
Come
businesses, than
on.
we do in those relationships. And that job and that business will
Why,
leave you high and dry.
why people think it's just gonna like be from osmosis? You just gonna
Smooth
create
sailing
you're just gonna create this
through the
relationship out of
smooth
nothing.
sailing,
We just going to go and
smooth
create
sailing.
everything from nothing. Let's go. Like,
No
where
such thing.
did it get it from?
Yeah.
Like, let's not think, we're not going to be thinking that way in 2025. 2025, we understand that we get out what we put into it, and we get to show up for our lives. We get to show up for our relationships.
Yeah.
Cheryl, did you talk about already in terms of when people have the lack of quality time, how it can make a guy feel? I don't know if you mentioned that.
No, I did not mention that. But when there's a lack of quality time, not just make the guy feel, but it can make the woman feel. Because we're saying when a man loves a woman, it can show up as disrespectful. It can show up as dismissiveness. It can show up as lack of care, lack of love, lack of prioritization. That person can feel like they're second, or they're not in your top three, if you would, of persons that are important to you. So when you fail to make quality time for your significant other, and talking to men in general and also women, when he fails to make you a priority in his life, and that's consistent, that can come off in a negative light. Women can feel neglected. They can feel rejected, unloved, unvalued, unworthy. A lot of times when that is happening, when there's a lack of quality time and lack of prioritization, that individual who feels that lack and experiencing that division, right, that divide in the relationship, they tend to go off and try to find that somewhere else, in other things. And more likely it's probably in another person. It's probably the work husband or the work wife. And although they may not be married, they have these terms. I hate those terms.
I hate those terms.
And we have what we say. Life and death is in the power of your tongue. So you're playing around with words and saying things, and you're making a verbal covenant, really, with someone that's not your spouse. We got to really be careful with that. So then you go on the job, you talk to Johnny or you talk to Joanne, and you share with them, well, my wife, my Carol, she's always hanging out with her girl. She doesn't care about hanging out with me or doing things with me. Or he may say, well, she may say, my guy, he's always hanging out with the guys. He's always at his mom's house. So whatever the case may be, I feel like I'm second to none. And here you have Bob comforting her, and you have Brenda comforting him. So we got to really be careful when we tend to put others in front of our significant others. And when your significant other comes and share that with you, from a place of a heartfelt place of, I need you to hear me. I need you to see what's going on. I need you to see what's happening in this relationship and how we are growing apart rather than going closer together. It is in your best interest to listen, especially if you want to be in that relationship.
Period. And that takes us right into the conflict resolution and being able to have a disagreement respectfully, and understanding that a disagreement is a disagreement. And that means that I have, or you have, whoever, the two people that's having a conversation, see things differently, which is beautiful, because you're two different people. So this, one person you have opposing views. But the thing what people get caught up in, we feel like we have to agree to be in agreement. And that's not necessarily true. You have to respect their perspective. You have to understand, you have to validate. And so before you even can get to saying, I understand where you're coming from, you have to validate what they're saying. And sometimes even affirming what they're saying, repeating it back to them, saying, hey, I'm feeling like you're not really considering my needs right now and what's important to me. So you can be like, oh, I disagree with you. Wrong saying, wrong conversation, wrong language, going down the wrong block, turn around. And rather than saying that, you can say, okay, I understand that you're feeling right now that I'm not prioritizing you and spending enough time with you, and that's making you feel a certain way. I can understand, that's what the validation comes at, how you feel, because that validation is an essential part to foster that sense of partnership, to foster that sense of mutual respect, to say, hey, I see you, I hear you, right? Hearing is like, I I don't even want to put the cat out the bag, but listening and hearing is a very, very important part. And I often say that is the sixth love language, is listening. And so you really get to say, hey, I hear you, I see you, and all the things. And from there, that really moves you through a way that you guys can get on the same page. We're not trying to agree. We're just trying to say, hey, I validate what you're saying. I can see how you feel that way. And then understanding how they feel that way. And then now we can talk about, well, what can we do differently so you don't continue to feel that way? You know, this one guy gave me a demonstration about that. When somebody's coming to you about a concern or a disagreement or whatever the case, you're not seeing eye to eye. It's like somebody keep tapping you on your shoulder, and you be like, chill, tell me that hurts. Say that hurts.
Oh, that hurts.
Okay. So I'm tapping her
that
hurts. And she's saying, I'll keep doing it. So when somebody is doing something that bothers you and you telling them they keep doing it, that's saying they're not considering your feelings. So the proper thing would be like, okay, well, oh, sorry, I didn't realize. And sometimes I do that. Sometimes I do hit my sister and touch her, like, and she'd be like, girl, stop. It's annoying. You know what I mean? But it's just like a habit. And so it's that subconscious habit. So I try to then be more in alignment and say, okay, let me keep my hands to myself and not, be so whatever with that, because it can be irritating. And I'm not talking about physical. A lot of times this can be an emotional concern, or somebody's feeling a certain way, and we get to acknowledge it in a way.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we can kind of end up into a destructive conflict, which can escalate into a disagreement. And when this happens, it definitely erodes trust, it erodes respect, and you're not creating a safe space. The word of God says, especially for wives, and if you're not a wife, you're all women that's listening to this podcast, you're a wife, because you're a wife, whether you're married or not, because God has created you that. Like when man finds a wife, he finds a good thing. He finds a favor from the Lord. In order for him to find a wife, she has to be a wife upon his coming on sight. Yeah. Right. So let's not confuse wifeship with ceremony and being in partnership. That's a posture that you hold. So with that being said, as a wife, the word of God talks about that a man's heart safely trusts his wife. Yeah. And so you want to, as the women, you want to be that safe space for him to trust you. And men likewise, we got to get to a place where we're allowing each other to express our feelings and emotions. And if you're not absent of judgment. Yeah, criticizing. And that could be so challenging, because you may not, your belief, value, and system may be contradictory. And I've experienced that, right? Like my belief is totally different, not totally, but can be slightly different than somebody else's. But I'm not going to dismiss what they say, they feel. I'm still going to try to understand, okay, how can I meet you halfway? How can, you know what I'm saying? This is the type of thing you got to be thinking about. Like, is it a way that I can still honor my value and still move with you in this space, or whatever the case may be? And sometimes, especially if you're not married, sometimes it may come out that you can't, and that's okay. Yeah. But these are the type of conversation we need to have respectfully, so that trust and respect is not eroded. Which, if trust is gone, listen, I love what Lewis Howes said, and I said it before, and I probably will quote this time and time again. He said, a relationship without trust is like a car without gas. No, it's like sitting in a parked car with no gas. You say you can stay in as long as you want, but it's not going anywhere. And so we got to keep that puller of trust. And in order to have trust, you have to have that safety, and you have to have mutual respect for one another. And that mutual respect saying, hey, if something I'm doing or saying is bothering you, I'm going to see what I can do to adjust, to accommodate whatever concern you have, and vice versa. If I'm not meeting your needs, if I'm not meeting your desires, whatever that thing is, like, I'm going to consider you, because we're in partnership. And because we go together, we're going to go together, and we're going to do things together. And I'm going to consider you in everything that I'm doing. Not everything, but I'm going to consider you in my decisions.
Mostly, if that person is a vital part of your life, and especially when you start talking about a long-term relationship like marriage, you kind of really do consider the person and everything you do, because honestly, at some point or another, everything that you do will impact that person to some degree, whether small or large. So that, when you were just talking about, oh God, you were talking about something, because I had a Bible verse for it. And when it talks about, oh God, I can't remember.
The heart of the man safely trusts.
No, you were saying something, but I can't remember, but I really do want to remember it. Keep talking. Let me see.
I don't remember. All
I do want to remember that scripture.
So I know we were talking about handling disagreements respectfully and constructively, having mutual respect, the importance of having trust, the importance of understanding, the importance of listening. Those are kind of core things.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
I should have wrote it down. I need to start writing stuff down.
and it'll probably come back to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Maybe if we go to on to the third thing.
Yeah.
And ask me, because we just be jelly beaning, and so we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
yeah.
stick
to one thing. Yeah.
So
So the last thing is appreciation and affirmation. And what we tend to do is when things are going wrong in the relationship, unfortunately, because we are human beings and we tend to want to bring, point out things that are going wrong because we feel it's necessary to point out. Sometimes we need to focus more on the right than the wrong. Not saying that we can't address what's wrong, but we do not need to make that the focus of the relationship. Yes, we do highlight. Yes, we do share, and we should be able to come and share and be safe in sharing absent of judgment, absent of criticizing, absent of feeling dismissed or as if I'm always complaining about something. Either way, right? Because men do tend to complain as well. So your partner should not ever feel uncomfortable coming to share because they feel that you're not going to hear them. They feel that they're not being valued. They feel like they're not being understood. You should welcome that door, open that door. I become all things to all people so that I may win some. That's one of the scripture I was going to share when you were talking about the beliefs. Thank you, Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the belief system. Like sometimes you don't 100% believe, not necessarily the spiritual values or Christian values, but you may have different belief systems about different things.
Political.
Right, political. And what Paul says, I become all things to all people that I may win some, meaning that he understood every person, not that he conformed to what they were doing, but he was able to sit in a room and have a conversation about the Steelers, although you might like the Detroit Lions, right?
Right.
So, and be able to understand, be able to respect that person in that conversation. And then there's another Bible verse saying when you go to a stranger's house or go to someone's house and they eat, whatever they give you, eat what they give you. Even if you feel like, oh, I don't eat that. Don't be dismissive in that way, saying you don't eat something. If they give you something, do it out of honor for the house, the house host, and ask the Lord to bless that, whatever you have, and eat it anyway. So it's something to that degree. I'm definitely paraphrasing, but I said that too, as it pertains to the belief system. Some things you probably don't agree with and some things you might not like, but it isn't always a timing, or it is not always beneficial for you to have to share your disgust or dislike about every single thing. And so we have to learn that in relationships as well, because you're not going to like every single thing about your spouse. So getting back to appreciation, or your spouse or your significant other. So getting that falls in line with the appreciation and affirmation. We have to learn to look at things that we do appreciate, things that they are doing well, if you would, things that they are doing to contribute to the health and the longevity of the relationship, versus the things that they may be doing some things you and also that person that are not necessarily beneficial or positive always in that relationship space. So I feel like if we focus more on the things that are well, the things that are good, the things that are positive, again, not dismissing the negative things, because we do at times have to discuss it. And I feel that with that, Jill, we need to schedule time to have those hard conversations and talk about those negative things and those things that may be contributing to the relationship declining. I remember sharing something with my husband, and I shared with him basically like I have to be able to share negative things with you as well, and you not be offended by that or feeling a certain way. It's not what I'm saying about you, but I'm sharing something that you may not feel good to you because it may be about the entire relationship or something that may be impacting the relationship. Something may sting you in particular, but I'm not necessarily attacking you. So there's a way that you can share the negativity or the things that are bothersome in the relationship without necessarily attacking the person. I statements, for instance, I feel neglected, I feel unloved, I feel unvalued when, right? So you're just sharing how you feel, and when a specific act or action or behavior is displayed, and then you and your significant other comes up with a resolution or a solution to the problem of how we're going to navigate through these feelings. And although you may be feeling that and they may not be feeling that, they should care enough to understand your feelings, understand your emotions, and want to help you get well or be better or feel better, whatever that may be. So when you demonstrate affirmation and appreciation, you're regularly expressing and affirming and reinforcing the positivity and creating a positive atmosphere in that marital relationship. I feel like the positive should definitely outweigh the negative. And I feel that I believe John Gottman said, I believe it's a 5-to-1 ratio when he was talking about for every one negative negative withdrawal, he talks about the one negative withdrawal, you need to have 5 deposits, right? So every one negative thing, I believe is 5 to 1. Somebody can correct me if that's not
that's
right.
Right. So I was
Okay.
thinking 80-20, which is
Okay.
it calculates to be the same.
See if they okay. So the one negative thing that you share about the relationship, about your significant other, you should have 5 things positive to say and to share. Otherwise, that absence of affirmation, and it causes a lack of recognition. It causes neglect, the individual to feel neglected. It causes the individual to experience resentment, disrespect, and all of these other negative things. And I'm not saying that you're never going to experience these things, because in this life, we're going to have trouble. We're going to have issues. We're going to have problems. That's just inevitable. However, we can manage those areas better if we learn to be flexible, bendable, adjustable, and we learn how to appreciate and how to affirm one another more, and not focus on what is always wrong and stay in a place where we're constantly criticizing, constantly judging, constantly putting down, constantly trying to course correct the relationship.
That's all good stuff. And some things you were saying, I was like, let me piggyback off of that. Even like you just threw out the word flexibility. And we get to, I'm going to take it, not to take anything away from appreciation, affirmation. That's important. To include complimenting is important, guys, right? Absolutely important, all as much as possible.
You know, I love you. You know, you're beautiful, but I need you to tell me.
Yeah. It's just like, people want to be seen.
Yeah.
Like, again, I'm going back to my buddy. I like Lewis, how he has a podcast, all the things. And I just saw a quote from him saying, most people don't leave a marriage because of lack of love. They leave a marriage because they don't feel seen. And for when a man loves a woman, he'll let a woman know he sees her by giving those affirmation appreciations in the form sometimes of a compliment, to let her know how nice she looks, especially she's getting all dolled up and everything. Come on, tell me I look cute. Okay, boo. Okay, just saying. I already know that, but
I want you to tell me.
You know,
it's just that thing.
Absolutely, and then it's just a good validation for your partner, and the girls.
Is she him?
As well.
Yeah,
for sure.
Ooh, you fine.
Okay, I'm feeling you. Listen. So also, let me just swing back to the conflict resolution, because again, some things you has kind of mentioned about the dismissiveness, and I wanted to say, when it comes to conflict resolution, especially my guys. And women do it too. I'm not going to say it goes both ways. When you are you don't want to dismiss or minimize, and definitely be defensive when somebody's saying, it's not like, again, don't internalize it and make it like this is attack on
victimization.
Me. Right. Don't go there. Try to say, what's happening and what am I doing or not doing? What am I saying or something not saying? And how is that making you feel? This is all about feelings. I mean, it seems like we sometimes have better intelligence about feelings in elementary school.
Right.
Than we do
more in
marriage. And I don't know if it's because, or in a relationship, I don't know if it's because we learn to suppress over time.
Trauma.
All these things, I think, cause our emotional tank and growth to be stunted, that we just almost like in this competitive space. And that is definitely, you don't want to feel like you're competing with your partner, not just even like competing to be the better one, but like competing for love or competing for resources. Like, there's an abundance amount of love available. There's an abundance amount of quality time and all the things that's available to you. So don't feel like you have to compete for sources. And that goes back to birth order and some other things we're not going to get into.
Yeah.
We went into that in a prior episode, I believe, a little bit. So I just wanted to point those things out, that if you're showing up dismissive or defensive on all of those things, you want to be validating. You have to agree. And you don't have to say, again, I'm just repeating myself, you don't have to say, I disagree.
And validating is not agreeing.
No, it's not agreeing.
It's just you're hearing. I hear you. I understand
where you're coming from. I can see.
I see. Okay.
How you felt that way.
Right.
Or I could feel that way.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? And you may totally don't agree that that's how they should feel, or that you know what I mean? But
you can feel how you feel.
They feel how they feel. And it's, and you get to honor that in that moment. And
this is grown folk stuff. Like,
come on,
this is grown people stuff.
And we get to decide and commit to saying, I'm going to show up, because the truth of the matter is, a lot of times the temptation is for people to, when they start to have the hard conversations rather than having those conversations, they tend to want to flee. They tend to want to walk away. Oh, this is too hard. Oh, this should be easy. Whatever that language or conversation they want to have. But that's, again, like we say, that's not true. That's the time where you need to say, okay, this is where I'm going to show up to say, how can I work through this?
Yeah.
So that we can have a better understanding, so we can get on the same page, even if we're not agreeing about every line item. And this is a great time to also quote John Gottman, which I always heard this quote. It used to be so discouraging to me, but now I understand it more, which is
grown people stuff.
Okay, grown people stuff. When you talk about a marital relationship or any serious relationship, 67% of the issues that you guys have are considered perpetual issues, which means they will always be there. So a lot of times, since she was saying, stop trying to solve every problem. Some of those problems are unsolvable.
Yep.
And it's not about solving. You still want to get rid of it and cancel. How about we manage it? How about we just manage it?
Yeah.
If I'm saying something you're doing or the way you're moving or whatever, I don't like it. That don't mean you got to stop doing it. That may be, well, rather you go, maybe you're wanting to go travel all the time by yourself for your work. Well, maybe not so much. You know, can't just stop traveling, but maybe you can say, okay, babe, well, let's just say
compromise
50% of the time, or even 100% of the time. I see some couples 100% of the time, and it has to be whatever you guys want. It's not about babysitting. It's about considering what the other person feels. It's about showing up for your relationship. It's about being in partnership.
Yep.
Like, what can I do to help you not feel that way? Like, this is all we're talking about right now. And we make it so complicated, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, how can I make you more secure? How can I make you more fulfilled? How can I support you more? How, you know what I mean? Let's just have these questions and answers. And so she said, let's have these difficult conversations. I would just say it's really great practice to schedule a weekly chat just about all the things. It could, and it could be a combination of like, okay, hey, babe, you was amazing at XYZ. This went good. I love it when you did this, that. And the third, when you said this, I was feeling the way about it, but I didn't want to say that in the moment, but maybe I misread what you said.
Yeah.
Like, we just have an open and honest dialogue. And I, speaking of it, and this happens, practice too with people of the same sex. The other day, my girlfriend called me and I had a major life event that had happened that day. And she totally forgot about it. So she called me and she started saying something about it. I was like, oh, XYZ was today. And she's like, oh, girl, I totally forgot. I didn't even realize it was that. And I said, oh, well, why did you call? I didn't mean it like, well, why, if you ain't calling me about that, why are you calling me at all? Right. I'm thinking, oh, okay, did you, because sometimes she'll call me and be like, let me run this past you. How about, what do you think about this? I'm wondering if she's calling me with a question and I had an appointment. So I also was maybe just thinking, is it something quick I can answer for you before I get off? Well, the next day she called me back because I was actually supposed to call her back and I didn't. And I was like, oh, thank you for not holding it against me that I didn't call you back. But I'm glad you called me. And, she's like, something you said yesterday rubbed me the wrong way. I said XYZ and you said, well, why did you call? I was like, thank you for telling me that because I didn't mean it in an offensive way. I was just wondering if it was like a question or something, because we be talking about all kind of stuff. We talk about money, we talk about real estate, we talk about relationships, we talk about marriage, we talk about dating, we talk about single, we talk about everything. You know what I mean? So and sometimes she calls me specific things. And so I had to apologize that I made her feel insignificant or as if she didn't have a valid reason to call me if she wasn't calling about that specific thing. But these are the type of things that we don't say.
Right.
And then you go.
That could have easily been brushed off and she didn't say anything. She could have started distancing herself from you.
Right.
And that's what children do. We don't.
Right. Like this talk, if I understand.
Immature. I wouldn't say children. I would say immature people. Yeah. You got to be able to confront those things.
For sure. And it probably just like I said, I had an appointment.
You had other things in your mind. You had a lot going on. So it's easy to not, I did the same thing like this morning. Something was happening. I was recording and, I said something because I was distracted when I was recording. I was focusing on recording and other things were happening in the background. It kind of just threw me off a little bit. And I had to go to the person like, oh, I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to come at you, like that. But that's, she was like, thank you for calling and telling me. So kind of similar. Right. But these are the type of conversations you have to have, especially when you get to a place where you're nurturing relationships and you care about the relationships that you have, which you should be at any state if you're in a relationship. And one key thing you were saying about, looking at yourself, I feel like that should always be like the number one. That self-reflection is not saying that you always wrong and why do you always have to do the work? Because I get that from my ladies all the time. Why I always have to do the work? Why I always? Well, probably because you're more aware of what's wrong or what's happening. So so you can look within to say, okay, how am I contributing? What can I do? How can I improve? And if you say, well, I didn't do anything, that's what you did wrong. Meaning, if I didn't address it, if I didn't say something, if I didn't speak
Being
up,
overly passive
right,
is not a good conflict
right,
resolution
overly
strategy.
submissive, like I'm just gonna go with it. Even I don't like it. I don't care about it. It really gets on.
Passivity, no, no,
We
no.
don't want to do that. So
Mm-mm.
if you said nothing, then that's what you said wrong. I did want to just correct one. The John Gottman is actually 69%. And when you said that,
Oh, I 6,
I
6,
remember.
7.
Yeah, I
Okay,
remember
give me
that.
together.
Yeah,
I was
yeah, yeah,
2%
yeah.
off. Listen,
It's
69,
69%.
even
That's
more, 70%.
yeah. That's it. Might as well say 70%. It's probably now that
Mm-hmm.
being everything, because he did that research a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that has transpired is probably higher than that right now. So we have to realize, stop trying to change people. I talk about that in my course. Stop trying to change an adult. If his mama couldn't change him, you can't. So I'm telling a woman right now, if his mama couldn't change him in the 20 years he probably was in her house,
20 or 30.
right? You can't. So stop trying to change a whole adult, a whole grown person, and accept them for who they are. Manage expectations. So you won't walk around here, pouting and upset and angry and, like somebody done stole your candy from you.
Listen,
That's all I'm saying.
well, I think this is a good discussion.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys, and we want to encourage you in this more right now to think about what area that you need to work on. We talked about conflict resolution.
Mhm.
We talk about appreciation and affirmation, and we talked
Quality
about
time.
quality time.
Mhm.
Like maybe it's one or two of those things, but I want you to commit to saying, "Hey, this is a skill. This is an area that I want to be more present in."
Mhm.
And women, sometimes we can't, even when a man is asking for the quality time, we don't have it, or we don't want to sacrifice it because we're such on this hamster wheel of a hustle.
Mhm.
And I don't know anyone who's been on their deathbed and said, "Hey, you know what?
I wanted to start a new business.
I really wished I worked a little more." And so we have to get in prioritization with our lives. And when we say the pyramid speaks for itself, God, self, others. And if you're in a partnership, your partnership comes first, especially if you're married, even before your children, absolutely,
Mhm.
whether he's the father or not. And so we got to operate in a divine order of things. And not to say, because I know some people are like, well, my kid's been here. Listen.
It's an order.
It's an order to things. And it's not saying that this person you're going to put this person before your kids and all of this, but there has to be a reverence and respect for that person's feelings, ideas, thoughts that should be considered first. And hopefully they consider your children enough that there won't be any real conflict to what your children need. Like it shouldn't necessarily have to be a conflictual situation. I think it could be managed. Or everybody needs getting met.
They be in relationship with jacked up people.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what it is. When I say jacked up people, and I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but broken people that have not done the work on themselves, and they get into relationships, and then you have all these problems, and now, here we are.
Yeah, and even it could be brokenness, but in addition to brokenness, there's also a real thing of just immaturity and inexperience.
Yep.
And that can be problematic, especially if that person isn't willing to grow and develop beyond where they are. So it could be a combination. It could be they're just unhealthy, have unhealthy patterns, or they can be inexperienced or they could be immature. But those things, again, if they're not willing to develop and start showing developmental and commitment to development on a long-term basis in this problem. And let's say this lastly for me, if you do see toxic, unhealthy behavior patterns, don't make the mistake of dismissing it. Because a lot of times, especially if you're dating, that's probably only like you need to compound that problem. Negative things, you need to compound that times 3 to 5. Like it's usually not going to get better.
Right.
Like if you already have a concern and you already see times 3 times, like they're just letting you see a glimpse of it because again, they're trying to show you their best self. So they're not going to show you everything behind the behind the
curtain.
covers. Yeah, for
behind
sure.
that curtain.
I mean, there's some people that's straight up authentic and who you sit and where you get, but
you can decide.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like people should be like that, and then you get to decide
for sure
if this is what I want. But like to your point, we're showing our representatives, so we're trying to be on our best behavior. And then once you get hooked in, then you see that sucker for who he is or who she is. You're like, what did I do?
And it could be
who did I marry? What's that series that girl did?
Who the hell did I marry?
Or something like that. I think she used another word.
I think she used another word.
Yeah.
Who the heck did I marry? Like
the F word. I think she said something crazy. But yeah, I'm like, you didn't know that? Like when people tell me, I'm like, you didn't see that? Like, I don't know. I have my thoughts on
I
that.
think I know, and sometimes we don't totally disagree. I feel like people can see a glimpse of something, and
Yeah.
you may see something, but you may not really know
How serious it
what
is,
that
I
means.
guess.
Like, especially like I love to talk about the feelings things. 'Cause I've been in a relationship like that where I felt like my partner just could not consider my feelings. And I didn't realize, well, first I didn't realize that that's what it was. I just felt like
Mm,
this is how they believe and they just don't agree with that until someone gave me that illustration. And I was like, oh, this means that they may not intentionally not care about how I feel, but they didn't have the capacity to consider my feelings because they were so in a place of trying to get their own needs met. And
mm,
that's when somebody has a level of deficiency. A lot of times in the parental relationship, they'll fight tooth and nail. And if they feel like you're not meeting that need, they will sometimes go outside the relationship and start getting a need met. And if you try to take that, almost like that you're taking their candy or taking their meal, you try to take their meal, they're gonna fight you tooth and nail, and it's just gonna be a situation.
yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna continue the
That's it.
conversation.
Yeah,
So
we got
that's
a
it.
lot to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about. It's
So
been a
until
good
next
conversation.
time, peace and blessings, and we will see you for our next episode of Relationship Topia.
Until next time, peace out.